Hi everyone. Today I'm going to be interviewing Diana. So what's new, Diana?
About as much as can be new under the current circumstances. As you know, I'm still a little bit, I wasn't expecting this to go ahead, so I'm still trying to just,
Sorry about
come
that.
back, come back to get out of my little introvert bubble and just
Yes. So
world.
we'll take around, usually takes around 10 minutes or so just to sort of warm up, just get comfortable. And it's fine. Like, a lot of people have also gone through interviews or some haven't. And it often has a sort of more awkward.
No, it's totally fine. Oh, it's not about it being awkward at all. I'm not worried about that at all. But it was just more, like I said, being psychologically prepared for something versus not being completely different things. Yeah. So it's really just the mental preparedness.
Right, I see.
So yeah.
And what is it about mental preparation which you benefit from?
It just gives me time to acclimate to the idea of something in my head before I have to do the real world thing.
Right, I see.
Yeah.
And does that show up in other areas for you?
Yeah, pretty much does. Like, as long as I know I can do things for the moment, it can be fine. But anything that involves even though once I am around other people, I'll be very social, or I tend toward being very social. It's usually just towards more social preparedness. So if I know, if I know I've got something going on later in the day, I want to preserve my energy as much as I can before that event. So it's not like, hey, I can be doing things all day and I just like have the energy to if I've got something on an evening, if I can, I'd rather just not have anything. Or more so, I'd rather not have to be too engaged with other people if I can avoid it. Yeah.
And is it specific and limited to interactions with people? Or is it more about activity in general?
Look, it depends on who I'm dealing with, but I think it can be activity in general. I just as much time as I can have to myself to be in my own head, the better. So I don't mind the activities and they're doing stuff with other people, it's fine. But again, the more notice that I have, even if it's like that day, like if it's like something I decide, yep, I'll go do this in the evening, as long as there's a good few hours where I can just sit in that space of like, I'm going to do this thing later, then I feel comfortable, then I feel fine. But if I'm just doing it like spur of the moment, I will feel a little bit disoriented for a bit.
That's fine. Yeah. That's fine. So let's talk a bit then about what's going on in terms of inside your head, in that sort of inner world you have. Well, where do you tend to go?
Just into my own thoughts and just like I like to joke that like basically my entire life, where I can outside of like the practical stuff you have to do, is just, I don't know, just me trying to get closer to what it is I think or what it is I feel about things. And yeah, I am never bored. I never experience boredom when I'm by myself. I don't even understand the concept. The only time I will ever actually experience boredom is if I'm with people and I'm not having the kinds of conversations that I want to have. That's the only time I'll ever experience boredom. But when I'm by myself, I'm never bored, ever. No matter what I'm doing, I'm just not bored.
Okay. And so is it that getting to sense of what you feel and think about things, is that entertaining for you or engrossing for you?
Yeah.
Or, okay.
Yeah, no. Go, sorry, finish your question and then I'll.
Or is there anything that you sort of think about which is more to entertain you?
Entertainment versus.
Oh, boredom.
Boredom. Are you asking whether my intention is to avoid boredom when I'm doing that?
Yeah, is it?
Not intention. It's
yeah.
Certainly I do avoid boredom when I'm doing that, but it's not the intention. It's just a nice byproduct.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay. And why? And is knowing what you feel and think about things, is that something which takes up a lot of your time?
Probably. Yeah.
And why do you like to find out what you feel and think about things?
Look, it's not even something I'm actively trying to do. It's just something that happens, and then like I'll just kind of, it's something I have to actually try to actively not do. So it's not like I'm not consciously thinking of doing it. It just ends up being the default, and then I have to sort of deviate away. So like if I'm talking to someone, for example, I've learned that I have to actually work at really being present in the moment and not like,
I see.
going on.
Okay, so give me just an example of when you've been, say, talking to someone and you find yourself going into the thinking about, and what were you thinking about there, and what exactly were you trying to ascertain, and then how do you then bring yourself back into the moment with that person?
It could be like if I'm having a more engaging conversation, it would happen less in this instance, but if I'm having a more engaging conversation, it might be that something was said and it's triggered something in my head. And then it's a bit easier to then quickly reel myself back in. But sometimes it could be like, maybe I'm just having like a more standard kind of conversation with like it could be like a housemate, for example, like from when I had housemates. And I guess I could just drift into like, just whatever it was I was thinking earlier that day. And I can't really pinpoint exactly what those, because the nature of it is, it's not one particular thing. It's just like, it could be anything. So yeah, like I said, the more engaged I feel, the less likely I am to do that. But I do catch myself doing that sometimes.
Let's see. And are you someone who prefers to be present and in the moment, or do you actually prefer just to spend time in your head?
No, look, when I'm with people, I do think it's important to like be present. So I have tried to like work on that. And irrespective of like how engaging I find the conversation, I will try to give that person my full attention. But it is something I've had to work at and get better at.
I see.
So, yeah.
So Dana, what do you when you're not cooped up due to quarantine, what do you tend to do?
See, the thing about the quarantine is I kind of love it to a degree, because it just sort of gives me more room to do the stuff I love doing anyway, which is spending a lot of time on my own. I'm not one of those people that's like really struggling with like the social distancing. Like in a sense, I kind of miss like having people be part of like the general ambience. Like if I go outside and there's just all these people around, because there's less of that now. But in terms of like interacting with people all the time, like I'm like an introvert at my core. So like I'm fine with this. But no, so what was your question again? Outside of quarantine?
Yeah, outside quarantine, what do you like to do? What do you tend to do?
I think I've already established I like being by myself and just with my ideas. I love music and comedy and reading and just all those sorts of kind of thinking about things and just sort of like and whatever I'm taking in, like I like it to fuel my thought processes or what I'm feeling or thinking. So yeah, but no, like nothing like in terms of like real world like extreme sports or things like that. No, like there's nothing, no hobbies of that nature as such. No.
I see. Have you acquired any sort of new hobbies recently? Or is it usually the same stuff?
A new hobby, huh? It seems, I think it's more or less always kind of like the same stuff, but like taking in new of that same thing. So like, it could be like if I'm trying to learn something, it's like, so still that activity, but like a different thing that I'm trying to learn. Or if it's music, it's sort of like still that activity, but then like a different thing that's coming in. But I generally like to spend more time with fewer things rather than less time with more things. Which as I'm saying it sounds very vague, but yeah.
No, that's fine. I think that makes sense.
Okay.
And how about outside just interests, perhaps in a career or things which you have to do and other obligations? Are you a working person? Are you more a person of leisure? Are you at school?
So I just finished in the last, luckily, just in the last year. So I finished up from like a research and social science degree. So in that I specialize in sociology and anthropology. And then I ended up, the place I was interning at, it was like an ethics education company. And so did an internship with them, and then they hired me just for a short contract, which I wrapped up about a month ago, to continue some of the work that I had started with them as an intern. So yeah, and that was like a research project that I was working on.
I see.
Yeah.
And what made you want to go into sociology?
I just love, sociology, like human systems, I love, like even before I got into my course, I just had always gravitated, like ever since I was a teenager, I'd always gravitated to these sorts of fields and subjects. So yeah, it's just fascinating, sort of like trying to understand humans and how they live and interact with their environments, depending on what the specific discipline is. So sociology has, one set of, principles and different theories that go along with that, and anthropology has its own, and philosophy has its own. But yeah, I'm really fascinated, and like there's a parameter there, but it's still like there's like a system that you can sort of build up your understanding of. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And so you say it's about understanding people in their interactions. Is that the
motivation? But like understanding, like there's such a wide confluence of forces like surrounding like why, not only why people do what they do, but also like why the political systems that we have, the cultural systems, social systems, all these things, why they align in the way that they do across various points in time. And why they have aligned that way, like through history, and how like our historical trajectory has informed where we find ourselves now. So all of that stuff is really, really fascinating. It's not just the phenomenon itself, but it's the underlying reasons. Like, why is this happening? What is going on beneath the surface that leads to this outcome or these outcomes? Like what I'm focused on.
I see. Are you quite a philosophical person?
I enjoy philosophy. Like if you ask me to, and I would try to avoid saying this to people because it sounds really like they're not going to know what I'm talking about. It sounds pretty wanky, but like if you ask me like what my favorite thing to do is, like I just love philosophizing, and it doesn't not even like formal philosophy per se. I just love like just talking about like, just even informally, like armchair philosophizing. It's just, those are my favorite conversations to have with people.
So what are some of your greatest philosophies?
I'm having quite a few right now, like with the current circumstances that are going on. I've been trying to like collect, like write down more of my thoughts on this because I'm really good at speaking it. But so with what's going on now, and again, I'm saying this just disclaimer because I know people will be like, oh, how does she think this is a good thing when there are all these bad things coming out of it? Multiple things can be true at the same time. So with the COVID-19 stuff, like there's a lot of bad stuff coming out of that, but I'm looking at it more positively. I think we kind of needed this. You know how you have forests and they need fire, they need to burn so that seeds can drop and they can drop and they can get nourishment and new things can grow. Like that's a cycle that has to happen. It has to happen. So that destruction needs to happen so new things can come forth. And this happens in economics as well. So I think just the way that happens in these other areas, it's something that humans need. This is a time for us to stop and consider what our collective values are. Because we're all interconnected, because this is not like an individual thing that we're dealing with. Like, instead of having this unique individualized narrative, we're all connected to each other through like this grander shared narrative. And because we're connected to each other through this grander shared narrative, it means that we're sharing the same vulnerabilities, the same anxieties, the same fears. And that is a very unique place for humanity to be at any one time. Because you need really to have like any honesty or any like anything good come from anything like at a grand scale. You need this bizarrely unique situation where like everyone's going through the same thing at the same time, and that never happens. It never happens. So this is giving us that. It's giving us that, and we really can use it to kind of like set the path and establish like, one, look in. It's like we're able to hold a mirror to ourselves and be like, are we okay with where we've been at? People who, I mean, I'm always checking in with myself, like, what do I value? What do I want? What do I care about? But a lot of people don't do that. So like this is an opportunity to give them a break and actually hopefully use it as a time to reflect on their lives. But again, for me, that larger narrative is the most important thing that could come from this. And we're at a time where, you know, normally it's so normal. You get people out in public and we kind of just all ignore each other and we're all on our devices. For the first time, we're separated from one another. All we have is our devices. That's all we have. So it's going to like, I hope, make us realize, hey, all we have is these devices. Oh, we don't have people around. There's no one around. So I hope that it would have the effect of making us start valuing actually having people around, since all we have now is our devices. So it's sort of like inverted the situation that we're used to. So like, yeah, like all these things, I think are really good things that are going to come out of this. And I'm excited to see whenever the end of this is, because who knows when it will be. I hope that we're here long enough, and I think we will be, that some of these changes that I'm hoping will happen will be enduring. So we'll see.
That's very, very, very insightful, Diana. Thank you for that. And you said that you know what you value and what you care about. What are the things which you care about the most?
Value what I care about. I think more accurately, I know what I think about things. So it's very difficult for me to break up what I think about things and what I value. To me, they're kind of like the same thing.
Right.
Yeah. So if you ask me that question, but aimed at like what do I?
So how
I probably answer. It'd be easier for me to answer, I think.
So right. So one way I'd ask you then is, how do you derive what you value from what you think?
That's a really good question. I don't think it helps me anymore. I've just always, I don't know if this is going to answer the question directly, but I've always, like, since I was a young kid, I grew up in a family and an environment, just in a place that everything that I came to, all the ideas that I had and that I came to as a teenager, I did not get that from anyone around me. It came from like just me internally thinking about things. I didn't get it from the internet. We didn't get the internet until I was like 8. So like stuff was not online. It was not in school. I didn't have friends. Or like there was just no one around me that was like had these ideas. But just from me thinking about things, I came to certain ideas. So for me, it's just like what makes sense, like based on what I'm observing, and then what makes sense to me based on what people around me are doing, I will form my own idea about that. And I will privilege my own reasoning above the reasoning that I see in the environment around me. So like I grew up in a religious household. I'm an atheist. But I grew up in a religious household. And from a young age, it did not make sense to me. And I would ask questions about it. And, you know, as a curious kid, I mean, the worst thing you can tell a kid who's asking questions is don't ask questions. So no one could ever really explain the concept of God to me. No one could ever really explain religion to me in a way that was convincing. And it was weird because like when you're in a family and then in a wider environment, where everyone is buying this religion, and you're not hearing any alternative views or narratives, but you still have this nagging feeling of like, this isn't all right to me. This isn't, I don't, like, internally, I don't accept this. Like, mentally, I've gone over this and I just don't think it, I don't think it holds up. So like, that's just always how I've done things. It's always been like me internally, like assessing like the values of like whoever's around me or like whatever environment I'm in or groups I'm in, being like, does this work for me? Like, I really value like being able to critically think about things. So if there's something in the wider environment that to me doesn't make sense, then I'm going to care more about my own thinking about that thing rather than what the external environment collectively is valuing.
I see. Now, it's interesting that you did a research degree. And how do you balance, or how do you have your own personal reasoning, and how do you bring that into accordance or into conflict or some sort of comparison or synthesis with the evidence which you're finding from the research?
Well, the interesting there is obviously you have like qualitative and then quantitative research. I was always far more drawn to qualitative research, because even though you have to, you still need good research practice and procedures and methodologies and all that. For me, it's much more fun, the qualitative side of things, because you're whatever data collection process you're going through, you're looking for the patterns and you're looking for the themes. And you need to like kind of like subjectively be able to pull them out. Whereas quantitative, I do not do so good with, because it is purely objective. But the pure number stuff just never really. I value it. I think it's important, but for me personally, in terms of, I much prefer working in the qualitative side of things. It comes much more naturally to me. So. Yeah, but that's not to say, again, like, to go back to the broader, like, that's not to say that because I'm arriving at things internally, like, that's not to say I'm ignoring the facts from the external world. I'm just saying that more or less, like, whatever my internal modeling of something is, like, because I know, like, I spend a lot of time, like, thinking about these things, like, I'm going to trust, like, my internally, like, what I think is accurate, I'm going to go with that. Over if I'm unsure of something, but then everyone else is saying, no, this is the case. I know some people will just be like, they'll just take, if most people in their environment are saying, yep, this is the thing, they'll just be like, yep, that's good enough for me. I'm the eldest of like 5 siblings, and they all kind of took that path of just absorbing what was around them. I was the one that was like, nope, I'm going to be a little black sheep of the family.
So is it easy for you to change your mind?
Yeah, look, the older I've gotten, the more I get to this, I've gotten to this point where I'm like, I value, like, there are so many things that are a paradox. And I say to myself all the time, I don't like hard lines. I like vague contours because they're really gracious. They can ebb and flow. And I really like that. So it's like things that I used to be even more sure of. I used to be so obnoxious too. Like in my early 20s, I was so obnoxious about so many different things. And I've just chilled out so much. Now I'm just like, people, for me, I really value, even if I don't agree with someone, I value understanding how they've arrived. For me, it's not the what, it's the how. How did they get there? Why did they get there? So, I mean, someone could have like a really controversial view. And for me, like, I don't think it's productive, and I don't think it's valuable to get mad at them because they have that view. I want to understand why they have that view. Because if I don't understand why they have that view, how can I begin to communicate with them in a way that they're going to be able to receive what I'm saying? If I just start yelling at them or telling them they're wrong, my ego is probably going to feel good. It's not going to achieve anything. They're probably, if anything, going to hold tighter to their view, and they're going to sort of end up thinking whatever view I'm trying to get across, they're going to be even more closed off from it, because now they're going to be like, that person who had that view, she screamed at me now, and they're just going to be like, yeah, anyone who has that view is going to be like the same, and they're all going to scream at me, and they're unreasonable, can't talk. It doesn't achieve anything. So, and this is another view I had earlier on in my life. I used to be like really intense about stuff, and I've just kind of done a 180. Now I'm like, people have their reasons, and I don't really care about being right anymore. I just want understanding. I just want understanding.
Thank you. And so are you someone who has more of a short temper? And if so, what things tend to irritate or frustrate you?
I used to have a really short temper. But like, I think it came from a good place. But I used to, like, for me, it's like the values that I had and the things that I had arrived at as a teenager and in my early 20s. It's like if the people around me, like, I would like tell them, this is what I've discovered, this is what I found, like give them all the reasons, be like, well, now like I've explained it to you and I've given you like, give them the stuff that back, which you can find whatever you believe, you can find stuff to back that up. But I would like find the things that be like, here, so I'm explaining it to you, here's the reasoning, here's like external sources, if you need the external sources, change. It doesn't work that way. Like I took a journey. I had the time to like arrive at certain positions that I had. And if someone had tried to rush me on that and deprive me of that process, I'm not gonna listen to what they're saying. I'm not gonna be convinced by them. So I was trying to do that to the people around me when I had not allowed them to figure things out for themselves. So I would never want to do that now.
Right.
So I'm a lot more, I think one of the biggest things that has changed in the last 5 years for me is, and I noticed that this is just a thing that people, and I thought maybe it's a thing that people grow out of, but I'm realizing not everyone grows out of it. And people like well into their 30s, 40s, like seem to still subscribe to like this way of thinking or this way of like developing their ideas and then relating to their ideas. But you need to have a separation. Like you are not your ideological values. Like the things that you believe in, like whether it's like whatever your values are, like political thing, religious thing, that's not who you are. You're a person, and then you have these things that are around. So it's like, I subscribe to this, I subscribe to that, I value this. They're not who you are, though. They're a part of you, but they don't comprise your entire being. And I think when you are a person, as I used to be, who you think that your entire being is comprised of your ideologies that you subscribe to, if anyone questions that, you think you can't accept it. You think that they're dismissing you as an entire being. And that's obviously going to be a painful thing for some experience. So if you can't have that separation between self and ideas, you get a world of pain. You end up alienating other people and alienating yourself. No one wins. But yeah. I keep, especially in politics, I see it all the time. So I have my views, but I honestly find myself not really wanting to even spend time in groups who even subscribe to the political ideology I subscribe to, because they're just a massive echo chamber, and I don't want to be a part of it. I try as much as I can to like read and watch things and speak if I can to people who have different perspectives, rather than spending time with people who just have the same perspective as me and just, I don't know. I'm painting with a broad brush here, but just generally that's what I'm seeing, like a lack of separation between ideology and self, and then it just you can't ever have like a discussion in good faith about something. It always just turns into like ad hominem attacks and just people taking things really personally, and I just find it's exhausting and it's totally unproductive.
Totally agree. Dana, in what situations are you at your most confident?
This is a strange one, because I feel these days, like I feel really confident in a lot of situations and simultaneously not confident in other areas. I think having time to sit on something before I come to it, I usually will be very confident in it. Once I've had that time to sort of like just, yeah. But if you just sort of throw me in the deep end, I won't feel very confident in that situation. I've gotten better at it. Like I can far faster than I used to be able to like quickly find my feet and then just get on with it. But yeah, I don't know how to be any more specific than that unless you ask me a more specific question.
I'd ask the opposite. So what situations are you at your least confident?
I'd say any situation where I'm dealing with too great a sense of imposter syndrome.
So imposter syndrome.
Pardon?
So what do you say? You say when you're dealing with imposter syndrome.
Any situation, where I'm dealing with too great an amount of imposter syndrome. And the thing with imposter syndrome is I think we tend to speak of it as like it's just one homogenous thing, when you can actually feel multiple forms of imposter syndrome to varying degrees in different facets of your life. So there are some facets where like I've been able to like limit, reduce, or overcome my sense of imposter syndrome in that area. And then I'll still have it in other areas. So generally, to go back to the original, answering the original question, anywhere where I don't have too great a sense of imposter syndrome. Yeah.
Could you give me an example of an area where you've most frequently felt imposter syndrome?
I can give you an example of an area where I felt imposter syndrome and then overcame it. And it was a process, but I felt imposter syndrome going to university, which is really strange because this is an environment where no one knows what they're doing. You go there to learn. That's the whole point of it. Like, I have this feeling where I need to be an expert first. And then I can like interact with people, interface with people. Like I feel this need, like I always need to like seem like I know, because I'm usually the person that people are coming to me for answers. I find it really hard to admit I don't know. But yeah, I had this sensation at uni where I was like, everyone is there to learn. And I'm feeling like uncomfortable being there. I overcame that by my third year. But I think for me, part of the reason that I felt that is I was the first person in my entire family to go to university. And growing up, it was never something that was valued in my family. It was like, I'm the only sibling who did end up going to uni, and it just wasn't a thing. And like, it wasn't talked about, it wasn't valued. So I always like had wanted to go, and I always like had wanted to like be in it. And then you get there and it's like, people don't give a shit about this stuff for the most part. So like my idea about like getting there and like, oh yeah, other people who want to have these like interesting conversations, and you get there, it's just a bunch of kids who are like, oh, I'm gonna do another assignment, damn it. Yeah, but I think for that reason, like just my unique like background and circumstances, it meant that when I was in that environment where like a lot of people are probably not going to feel that way, because the whole point is you're an idiot, you don't know anything, that's why you're there, to learn. But I still had this feeling of like, I'm not supposed to be here and they're going to find out about it. And yeah, it made it a bit hard because I'm always that person in class that's like always like adding in, like always asking questions and always like putting in like my perspectives on things, and always like trying to like be like, oh, if you have this theory and then like it aligns to like something that a different theorist said, and trying to like find the commonalities in the framework. So the difference is like I was always that student. But for a while, like I would feel like a little bit like, I'd feel a bit concerned about like expressing certain things. That I'd be like, what if I don't have enough information and everyone else has this information, and I'm just like, then I look like an idiot because it's an incomplete thought or whatever. So yeah, it took me about 3 years to get over that. And it wasn't until I got to the third year, I was looking back and I was like, wow, like I've had imposter syndrome this whole time. And that's sad because the whole point of this environment is to foster learning and questioning and curiosity. And like, they know you're not going to know this stuff. That's why you're there, to learn it. So to feel like a fraud to being in a place to learn, like it's just, yeah. So that was an area that I actually did have imposter syndrome.
Interesting. Thank you.
Yeah.
And let's see, do you have many friends?
No.
Okay.
No, I have fewer people in my life who like I'm very close to.
I see.
It takes a lot. I have acquaintances, and I guess this is what anyone else would just say, oh yeah, they're friends. I don't do that. I'm not going to call you. I'm not going to call someone a friend.
Yeah.
And like it's a very specific meaning to me. So shorthand, just if I'm talking to someone, I'll be like, oh yeah, my friend is, but I'm probably just talking about an acquaintance or just someone that I knew or whatever. Right. But yeah, in terms of, I am not capable, or rather I don't enjoy having friends in my life that like, if you're in my life, I'm going to talk to you about everything that I want to talk to you about. Like, you're going to get all my thoughts, all my ideas, anything that's like, you're going to get all of it. It's very all or nothing. I don't segment. You get it all. And I want to get, because I know I need a lot of time to myself. So I can't even have that many friendships. So I'm also receiving the same in turn. But yeah, I find it difficult to have like friendships where it's just sort of like, you just talk about one area or another area and it's just very segmented. Like that's not, I don't like that. I really struggle with doing that. So it's really all or nothing with my friends.
You gotta open the floodgates to have that conversation with someone, to have that closeness with someone.
What do you mean by that? Open the floodgates?
Like everything and anything.
But for me, more than anything, if I can have a conversation with you about like my ideas,
yeah,
and you can like engage with me at that level and throw in more ideas, like if we have that, then the friendship will be easy. But I've had like friendships or acquaintances who like because I'm good in a social environment. I understand. I'm trying to focus on like, okay, not everyone's gonna be able to understand what I'm saying. So sometimes just to make people feel good, like I'll be friendly and I will let them like get, I went to like a department store not the other day, like 2 months ago now. So just before all this stuff hit. And I was just like making really quick friendly conversation with like the woman at the cash register. And then this guy had they've got like this logbook at the front of some stores when like a visitor comes in and they need to sign off when they've been to the store to do whatever they need to do. And so he had heard part of our conversation. And then he was really interested. He started getting into, we're talking about the gig economy and just like, how you don't have like the stability like that you had in the past with more traditional jobs. And then he sort of chimed in. He had a lot to say on it. And so even though I was done with the cashier woman now, and now I'm kind of standing there and I'm ready to go. But now this guy, and I'm like, in my head, I'm like, oh, he may not have spoken to anyone today. He's really enthused about this conversation. He's got a lot to say. I want to kind of give him the room to speak and to say what he needs to say, even though it's rather one-sided. And yeah, like this is just a stranger. Like, and I don't care enough about, like, by this point, the conversation had gone to an area where like I can't speak to that stuff enough because like he was much older and like, well, I don't know about this stuff that he was talking about from early in his career, but I wanted him to feel like, hey, yeah, like I see you, like I hear you, because I'm thinking in my head, he may not have anyone to talk to. He may not, like I don't know what his situation is, but just the way that he chimed in like that, I suspect that he just relished like having someone to like express himself to. So I wanted to give him the space to do that. And even people that I come into contact with a bit more regularly, I will try to give them that space, but it's taking away a lot from me personally if we can't meet on the same wavelength or a similar wavelength, and I can have a conversation with them that I'm also really enjoying. So able to, like my housemates, for example, who I live alone now, which I love, but when I was living with people, it was really draining because I knew, hey, I've got to do the housemate thing. I have to be part of the house. I can't just lock myself in my room all the time. They're going to be like, it's going to impact the vibe in the house. And so I was aware, like I would very strategically like casually lounge sometimes. And I'm not a casual lounger. I'm not just hanging out down. No, like anytime that I was downstairs, just hanging out in the kitchen, that was very specifically. So like, oh, okay, such and such is going to come home now. We'll be able to have like a conversation. They'll feel like, oh yeah, even though we don't see much of Diana, we're having this exchange with her. So, and she's fine. She's just a bit busy, but yeah, look, she's friendly and we can chat and whatever. And yeah, and it's just sort of like just losing the example I'm trying to give here, but just applying oil just to like keep things like running smoothly. That's what I would try to do, even though the conversations were never particularly interesting and were very, very repetitive. Oh yeah, I was just at work, I had all this paperwork to do and blah, 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 blah. And then someone came in and they gave us this.
And why is the vibe important to you?
I think it just means that the house, there's a harmonious feel in the house. And while that might sound, and I've tried to figure it out, it's like, what is my real intention here? Is it that I want everyone just to feel good, or is it that I am aware that there's a power imbalance because I was like subletting. So it's like you had the main couple who were like on the lease, but the other two people, like me and another girl that lived there, we were subletting from them. So there is a bit of a power imbalance. So I'm like, and they're really, really social. They're like really social people. They have people over all the time, which like would exhaust me. Because I'm never, it doesn't matter how drained I am. If I'm down there and there are people around, I'm not going to be like, no, I'm not going to engage with you. I'm going to put on a smile and I'm going to like try to, you know, be nice while I'm with them, and then get away as soon as I can and just be by myself again. So I don't want other people to feel like they don't have my attention, and that like, I don't want them to feel uncomfortable. But then the other part of me, like with the housemates, is aware that like, if it does skew too much, like if they do think, hey, Dinah is never here, she's always in her room, even when she's home. Because I think they have this idea that if I was home, I was available. And it's like never like that. If I'm home, I'm not available. If I'm home, I'm like up, I'm doing my own thing. And I'm retreating from the world. Like, let me just, yeah, like I'm not available. But other people, they didn't see it that way. And I was aware of that. So I would try to just make sure that I was around from time to time, just to keep things feeling okay in the house.
Thank you. Okay. What do you think? So what's a good example situation where you found someone who can actually join you in your reflections?
I don't know what it would translate to in sociology, but in other typologies like MBTI, for me, it's always the IPs. There's something about the IPs, just there, maybe they've got that extroverted intuition. I gel so well. And I have this thing, I will notice them. I'll get a vibe about them very quickly. And I'm usually right about it. So I'll just be that weirdo that just will kind of like go, you know, just go up to them and like, just start talking, just being very open with them. And they always respond to it so well. And those are the people I tend to end up being very close to.
Could you just help me by translating that into what's actually being done, what's actually being said?
There's just an openness from them. They're just so receptive to everything I say. I never feel like, oh, am I being appropriate? Oh, is this like a normie enough conversation? Is this like, because there are other people, like to take a uni, for example, there were people where it's like, all I could ever talk to them about was like, oh, the assignment this and the assignment that, and that, just really basic stuff. And like, that's fine to start with, but you should get to a point, or I would like to get to a point where like, yeah, that's just sort of the scaffolding for like the good stuff later. And there are some people you can never really cross that barrier, but I would find that these other people, it's like when they would be really, really receptive to that, and then you get that like really fast, firing, flowing conversation. Usually those are the IPs. But what characterizes it? That we can have those conversations, and I find them really engaging. I never feel bored with them, and I could like be with them for a really long time before I start feeling like, hey, I need to be on my own again.
Okay, and just to clarify, is that IP in OP? Is that IPOP?
No, I don't mean it in, even though OP is a system I'm currently studying, I don't necessarily mean it in OP. But I don't know if I don't see it as being inconsistent with IPs in the OP system.
Okay, so it's more people who are flexible and receptive to what. So
more people have like extroverted intuition, I think, because I don't really want to go. I try to keep a distance between myself and any particular type, even in MBTI. Like I haven't wanted to do that really, just in case I was wrong. I always want to get more information before, like I don't want to associate with anything too much. But the IPs are that high extroverted, like they're amazing listeners. They're amazing listeners that are happy to defer to me most of the time, and then just like, so I can be the instigator and they just respond to me, and I love that. It works. It's a dynamic that works. So yeah. So it's that. But then there's also been like, there's like an ISTP who he was like really into philosophy. So like that actually was true, because he was really open to talking about like a lot of ideas. So just IPs in general, it's not necessarily just the intuitive types. But yeah, more than anything, they're amazing listeners, and they are so good at just anything I put out there. They've always got something to say and then expand on that we can just sort of keep riffing with. So yeah, it's just that quality of always having something to counter back with that expands, and they can expand while I'm sort of like deepening or honing in like my understanding of things.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
I see. So also you said that there you're also quite an instigator. Why do you like to be the instigator?
I don't know, it just comes naturally to me, just to be the one. I'm comfortable being the one to start things. Because I think one, like being the eldest of 5 kids, like it probably, like I usually had to lead. I was always like looking after people or leading. So like that, I think because of that, it came very, despite what I think is like a very introverted nature that I have. I think I was very comfortable with it for that reason, but also, I don't know. I just seem to be good at it. Even when I'm not trying to instigate, I've just noticed that like I naturally seem to fall into that role. But I know sometimes people can find me a bit intense when I'm trying to like direct things. Be like, okay, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do that, we're gonna do that. Like they find me intense, but like they're happy that I'm doing it. But there's also that, yeah.
I'm sorry, I missed the first part of that answer because my internet went a bit funny. But you said you end up in the role of instigating, but I didn't hear the first part of your answer.
I end up in the role. I forgot what I said around. I end up in the role of instigating. Which parts did you hear?
So I said that's the part I heard. So I end up in the role of instigating, and people.
Yeah, even if I'm not necessarily like seeking it out, I will kind of. I think there's just something about how I speak and what I like. It just people like this happened in uni all the time. Like we'd be in a group, and even if I wasn't like automatically assuming the role of like the leader, like any ideas that I would have, I would like, maybe because I'm presenting them so confidently, like I'm initiating the brainstorm and all that, like people would then just like look to me and be like, all right, what do we do? And the other thing I said was sometimes people could find that kind of like a bit intense or like too controlling, but they wanted me to take the control. So it was just, it's an interesting dynamic.
Right. And okay. And how do you handle
found it controlling when they haven't wanted to do the work? When you get some of those slackers who just want to kind of coast, it's like, no, I'm gonna help set the tone, but you also have to do the work. I'm not gonna do it for you. You got to go do your work. Then maybe that's when they're feeling like they're infringed upon.
How do you handle situations of confrontation and conflict with others?
I like to deal with it. I don't like conflict, but I also know it's not about liking or disliking conflict. It's just necessary. Anytime you get human beings that are in close quarters with one another, whether it's a relationship, friendships, housemates, you can't avoid it. Like it's unavoidable. If you can show me 2 people who are close to one another and never have any kind of conflict, like I'll wait because you're not gonna be able to do it. You're not gonna be able to show me those people. They don't exist. So I just see it as like it's necessary, and the sooner that you deal with something, the sooner everyone can just be happier again. So I don't shy away from it. I like to just deal, and it drives me crazy when other people like are trying to like not like the IPs. They're great, but they don't like dealing with things. So yeah, I like to just deal with things. I can't segment things. Like for me, if there's something that's bugging me, it's always in my head. It's just there until I deal with it, process it, and then put it away. I can't compartmentalize it and put it in a different part of my brain. It's not going to happen. I need to deal with it.
So does it mean that you can be quite impatient?
I can be impatient, yeah. Especially if I feel like the other person is taking too, and I've tried to work on this, but yeah, if I feel like someone is like just taking too long, or if they just keep trying to buy time, but they're never actually coming around to that point where it's like, okay, we're going to deal with this now. Because sometimes the best thing is space, is to give people time. Because not everyone can process things as quickly as I can. Like I can process things so quickly. Like I'm coming, like as I'm externalizing things, more is coming to me. But I know that not everyone does things that way. So having the space if someone says like, hey, give me a day or give me a week, like I can do that. But if we get to that point in time and you're not ready to deal with it, I'm not going to be happy about that. I'm going to probably force you into like, hey, now you're just trying to get out of doing this because you're scared, and until we deal with it, you're not going to be able to like overthink it, and you're going to be stressed out so unnecessarily until it's. So I would just rather deal with it, and it's so much easier to do that in close relationships. So when it comes to people like that, you're not as like my housemates.
Yeah,
that's really, really difficult because I know I'm not as. It's more of a transactional connection that I have with them. I'm renting a room in their house, and no matter how friendly we are with one another, I'm always aware that that dynamic is really underpinning our entire interaction. So because I knew I was going to be there in this particular place for a finite, like I knew exactly how long I was going to be there. So I let a lot of things slide that normally I would not let slide. I would just let some things go. Because I knew I could already see how it would go. Like knowing what I knew about the people, I could see like these are not people that are going to be able to deal with having this conversation, even if it is a calm conversation, even if it is totally justified. I just understand the basic principle. Whenever someone has power, like if you're in your own home and you have power in that situation, if you're doing something that's causing someone else to be uncomfortable or is causing, is impacting someone else's experience, if you're in a position of power, if someone comes and says that to you, some people aren't going to care. They're going to be like, well, this is my place, and if you don't like it, and they can do that because there is that imbalance. So I'm always aware that that's there. So I had to like tread a bit more carefully. And the one time right before I left, where something major came up, I was like, okay, this is something I'm going to really, I am not okay with, like, there was something that they wanted to do. I wasn't okay with it. I was like, that's it. I'm not going to worry about the dynamics here. This isn't cool. I'm talking to them about it directly. And as I predicted, they were not able to deal with it. And the whole irony of that entire situation was the reason I was still there was so that I wasn't going to give them, it was like if I had left over Christmas time, I didn't want to give them the stress of having to then find a replacement for me. Even if I gave them the 2 weeks, which is all I had to do, I did not want them to then deal with the stress of trying to do that at a holiday time when they're going to be wanting to spend time with each other and with their family. So I was like, I will put it off until a time that will be more convenient for them. And then this stuff came up, and they seemed to have such little regard for like my thoughts and my feelings on a matter. So my original point was, I just the conflict, it's frozen up a little bit. Can you hear me, Jack?
Hi, Diana. Sorry about that. My internet's being a bit temperamental today.
No worries. Hopefully that doesn't happen later in your debate. I know you're.
No, I'm going to try to make sure I'm on the couch, as I'm as close to the router as possible.
Okay.
But so I'll tell you where I am at the moment, Diana. I'm thinking beta values in terms of quadra values is making the most sense. Placing you exactly within that, I think, is going to be a bit more interesting. Now, I'm leaning more beta integrator. And so I'll tell you what I think about that in terms of beta integrator. So beta values in terms of, first of all, authentic self-expression. This idea that once you actually have that connection with someone, you actually have that close relationship, it is very much expressing almost anything and everything about what you want to talk about. And when you have a disagreement with someone, you want to clear the air, you want to confront it, make sure that that conversation is had in a very clear and open, authentic sort of way. And the way you approach knowledge, the way you approach understanding is not about just fact collection. It is about, first of all, there's a tendency, and you've learned over time not to do so much, to really identify with your core beliefs, your core structures, and about analyzing phenomena to find underlying trends, the deeper underlying trends beneath the surface, which I think is really important, really salient. And the idea of when you have a sort of structured way of thinking, and you want to also show with as much stuff as you can to, you used to think, I need to really change people's mind. If I just hammer them over the head enough with my logic, they will change their mind. When they don't, that became frustrating and more, even more frustrating to you. There's also this tendency to assume that you be almost like the expert in position. It was almost a problem for you when you weren't at university, you weren't in a position where you knew enough to be the expert. So this idea that you need to be sort of one who actually knows, who understands. You also one who's very much, there's also a common theme of detachment from you, detachment from day-to-day experiences, just to go, rather than going out and just talking to people and being open to whatever experiences come your way. There's more, these are my reflections, these are things I want to talk about. I don't want to think about these things. I want to focus on these things instead. So those are the things which are coming out, that detachment, a sense of dissatisfaction with just day-to-day taking that sort of stuff in, but also a desire to really demonstrate and hammer down what you think is right based on your reasoning. So overall, I'm thinking beta. I'm also thinking the push parts of that are more so the introverted intuition and also the introverted logic. So thoughts, reflections on what is more important, what is more meaningful to you, and also a sense of structure, a sense of understanding how things fit together in quite a structured way, not in terms of just lots and lots of facts coming in and looking at whatever seems to work. So I think those are the main parts. I'd also, so what I'd like to ask you then is looking then at between LSI and IEI, because I came through quite a journey in analyzing you. So to begin, I think people were thinking, and I was thinking perhaps maybe some sort of EII, but there's lots of thinking, there's lots of working out what you think about different things. There's also, interestingly, the tendency for you to need to be prepared, for you to be confident in what you're doing. And I thought maybe that was weaker extrovert sensation, but you need to really think things through before you're happy taking any sort of action. But now when you're talking, it suggests that actually you tend to be seen as the authority, you tend to be one who instigates. And when you see a problem in the moment, you don't seem to have much trouble confronting it and bringing that into a more confrontational conversation to seek an outcome. Now that would be, so that's interesting. So initially I was thinking maybe IEI, maybe an LII, which is a low extrovert sensation type, made more sense. But now I'm thinking maybe a type which is higher in extroverted sensation, just doesn't push it as much compared to introverted intuition.
So how would we go about narrowing?
Well, I think the thing to do is to find those weaker areas for you and try to really understand that. So, for instance, a lot of your social interactions with others, it seems to me, is more like, oh, people have these expectations. I need to manage what I want to do just to get by in these sort of social expectations. Is that an accurate framing of what you're doing with people, or is it more
what my understanding of the constraints of the environment? If it's people that I'm living with, that's really different to people that I get to like separate from at the end of an interaction and then go home by myself and be by myself. So when those people are in my house because I live with them, it's a different animal. But I certainly do like for it to be more on my own terms, which is why like I tend toward needing more time to myself, because I know that when I'm around people, I'm going to be on. I can't even help myself. I need to be on with them. And I need them to feel good. So I can't live in that space. I need to then have a lot of time to myself, because I know as soon as I'm with others, I kind of like have this thing of like, I need to give others a good experience almost.
Okay. And what exactly do you mean by on? Is it about that good experience, or is something else which you meant?
Pardon, what is?
What being on about giving that good experience for others, or was it something else?
Engaging, like not being a bore in a conversation, like listening to them, making them feel good, asking them questions. Like I really value good conversation. I don't like laziness in conversation. I don't like boring conversations. Like I know myself, I have like too many boring. So I'm always like trying to like just make things a bit fun and interesting. And and just sort of giving like non-normative answers. Like even if it ends up making me look a little bit weird, like I think like, hey, like just do something that pushes the norms a bit, or like just even if it makes people laugh. And it's something a lot of the time it does. I'll look at me and I don't mind. Like I'm fine for people to laugh at me a little bit if I can laugh too. Yeah.
Okay, so that's interesting. That you need people to be, you know, to have that positive experience. You need to sort of warm up the conversation, but you also find having to do that is something which is quite draining for you to be the one doing, and you need the preparation. Yeah, for you to be the one sort of warming up the conversation, making the situation a positive experience for people. Is that right?
It's draining for me to. No, not so much. Usually I am the one instigating. And if I'm not like instigating the actual conversation, I will be the one that's usually trying to push the conversation into what I think is a more interesting area. So yeah. So it's not just all about like, hey, I want to enjoy this. Like I want them to, like, I want to challenge people too. Like I want people to like ask different questions or like think about things differently. And sometimes like I'll ask people things or I'll say things and they'll just look at me like, that's a strange thing to say. And I'm like, good. I hope it's a strange thing to say. I hope it's like breaking like your little bubble of what you think is normal. I hate normal.
Right. Okay. So you're the ones actually knocking things down, taking it to new directions in that conversation because it needs to be something.
And I don't mind. Sometimes it can be like a little bit at my own expense, but it's like for me, it's like if what's the outcome? Like the outcome is what I'm focused on. Like if the outcome is like, hey, that person is like, oh, you said so, like no one, you know, I love talking to, like I like going to get my morning coffee. And I always like will just have like a little chat with like even just the baristas. And I'm always like on such a good basis with them. And it's just, I can see them smile when I come in because it's like they know I'm gonna talk to them. I'm gonna ask them about their life. And I'm gonna say something a bit silly just because I think, how many times is someone gonna come in while they're there at work and they're like, hey, how are you? I'm good. How are you? Good, thanks. Cool. Like that must be so boring. I'm like, they're stuck here. I want to like be a little bit different. I want to like make them laugh, and I want to like just add something that's like isn't the usual shit that you would hear from your customers. So like I just want to make it interesting.
Right. As interesting that you also want your interactions to not be normal. You want them to have something special.
I want it to be different. Yeah.
Right. Okay. That's interesting as well. Thank you for that. Okay. Interesting. So what I'd like to ask you is about the day-to-day. Are you someone who sort of is good at managing the sort of day-to-day stuff? Do you have regular sleep cycles? Do you remember to eat stuff?
I'm not really so good with the day-to-day. To be good with the day-to-day, I really have to like think about the day-to-day, and I have to keep a list. If I don't keep a list, the act of keeping a list, it's more about like externalizing and making tangible in a way by writing it down, like something that needs to be done. And if I can do that, it's easier for me to be like, oh, hey, I've got to do that thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I'll do this thing just to sort of get the ball rolling. When I'm making my list, I'll start out with putting. Trick I learned a while ago is put easy things on the list, because you put the easy things on the list, it's so easy to get the ball rolling and really build up this momentum. Like brush your teeth, like I'm going to do that anyway. But if I put it on the list, then hey, it's something that I get to count as something I won for the day. I made my bed, I brushed my teeth, I got dressed to go out. So I will put the basic things too, because once you've got them on and you're ticking them off, it's kind of like you end up in this flow. So it makes it easier to do the other things that I need to do.
Right, I see. And stuff like how do you like to just relax? How do you like just turn off your mind and just relax in the moment?
Turn off my mind. I don't. I don't know how do you do that? I don't know how to do that. The closer thing I found to, like, especially at night, because like, you know, when you want to go to bed and your mind's like, no, let's think about 50 things before you go to sleep. One thing, and it's a very narrow way that I apply this, but one thing that I find good kind of trying to achieve that, like turning off my mind, is to play like just a game on my phone. So like, I'll just like a word game or something, and it's really good at, because I'm focused on the game, it'll sort of like pull me out of my head. So if I'm struggling to sleep, I can do that, and that usually will help me get to sleep. But in terms of other ways of doing it, I mean, there are things where I can get closer to it to sort of, it was almost like a meditative process, like going to the park or going for like just a walk. So I can
I'll very quickly plug in my computer. It's going to turn off any moment. I'll be right back. Hang on a second. Here we go. Right. So
I just want to say, because I've watched a few of these videos now, and something I've noticed is that you do this. You will just be like, oh, I've got to go get my charger, and I found myself thinking that would never happen. I've got my charger here. I've got my phone. I've got my cup of tea. I've got my pot. Like, just in case, I have all the things so that nothing can go wrong, or like if I need anything, it's right there. So that's just an interesting thing. I noticed that you're just kind of like, yeah, I'll gotta go do this. I gotta go grab that. And it's like, yeah. That would not happen to me.
You like to prepare your experiences with people, so that things don't go wrong. You're thinking, what could go wrong with my experience with people, so that it creates the wrong sort of outcome. Right. Okay. So now I want to look a little bit more into the TI area. So you told me before about certain principles or ideas which formed almost your identity. Could you tell me or articulate to me some of those sorts of structures, some of those foundational parts or insights?
You mean like the specific ideas that I arrived at, or?
Yes, the points where you used to identify very strongly with them.
Okay, so one of the earliest ones would have been religion and questioning that, and then sort of like in my teenage years getting to a point where like I sort of began down this trajectory of like losing confidence altogether outwardly and openly with that stuff, and then sort of that like becoming an agnostic, and then going like full, I mean, I went like full Richard Dawkins level, which I don't think is a good level of atheism, but I went to that level. I've chilled out a bit now, still an atheist, but not that extreme. But I did that. Another one early on is like, you know, when you're a kid, and I think for different kids, they'll have this experience at different ages. You just tend to think when you're young, you don't perceive, you don't realize, you don't even think that there could be any problems in the world. You think that adults just have it all figured out. You don't have any conception that like, hey, the world's unfair or the world's dangerous or there's a lot of shit that happens out there. You just think, yeah, adults are fine, and you know, they know what they're doing and they have their shit together. So for me, I kept experiencing, like I kept noticing like bits and pieces here and there, and I'd be like, that's a bit strange, because again, my thinking is there's nothing wrong, like everything's equal, everything's fine. So like I would just notice like just sporadically like bits and pieces, like things that just, I'm like, huh, that's like a weird imagery. Like I had no conception as a child, for example, of like any gender disparities in anything, or like inequities or sexism or any of that. But like I would just like notice things like every so often, and I would just be like, huh, that's a bit weird. But I didn't think, because I didn't have a framework to put it into of, oh, this stuff belongs to like it's this issue. It just kind of stood out to me. And growing up, I kept noticing this stuff, and no one was talking about it. Like no one mentioned it, but I was like, it's there. I'm putting together this, I'm building up this idea, and like I'm seeing this stuff. It's something. There's like a thing here. It's a thing, but I didn't have a label for it yet. I hadn't found what it was yet. Like I hadn't found any of that stuff, but I kept seeing it. And I had an experience really young where we had this the opposite of an excursion, where you have a speaker come to your school and they go classroom by classroom just giving a talk. So we had this Indigenous speaker who'd come to our class when I was like 8, 9 years old. And he had just made this, he had, you know, Indigenous Australians, so they have their instrument, the didgeridoo. And he had basically just made a throwaway comment of women aren't allowed to touch this instrument. And again, I'm a kid and I'm sitting there thinking, huh, that's interesting. Oh, and then for question time, I was like, oh, I'll ask him why. And then I asked him, oh, so why can't women play the instrument? And he just said to me, because they can't. And I was like floored that like this person who had come to our school, like I had asked him why, and he just said because. And so I said to him, oh, but why? And then my teacher, he scolded me. He's like, he answered your question, like, stop, don't waste his time. And I was just like, he didn't answer my question. Like, he just said because. He didn't answer my question. So that moment, like, I was like, okay, this is the thing. But again, I was only 8 years old. I didn't have anything that I could point to or explain why this was happening. But over time, it's like, okay, this stuff keeps happening. And then I guess another example would be like, you know, going vegetarian and then vegan. No one in my family, like, it was like a laughable thing to do in my family. And like, there was no one even like in the greater, like where I grew up, like it just was unheard of. It just was not a thing. But I found myself like developing like my own internal like ideas about this. Like for ethical reasons. And like, just, yeah, like internally I was like, well, you know, I think I was doing this thing where it's like, it's gonna be too difficult for me to explain, but basically it's more like imagery rather than like, it'll take time to try and like get it out into words. But yeah, it was just always stuff that wasn't being talked about, but I could like the vegan one was interesting, the vegetarian one was interesting because there wasn't anything for me to like observe from that. It was just like internally like processing and thinking about and being like, does that make sense? Like, does that?
Why does it make sense?
Are you asking me why it makes why does what make sense?
Yeah, why does going vegan make sense?
I think in my head, because at this point, I particularly like, I guess by the time I was a late teen, early 20s, like I had found like, you know, like sort of like the inequality stuff, like the history of it and all of that. And I was like, oh, okay, it's this stuff that I'm like, that's what I've been picking up on all this time, but I had no idea what it was I was noticing. I think I sort of like scaffolded, like sort of connected. Again, I don't segment things. Like things in my mind don't exist as like there's just one thing here and then one thing there. Like I will see the connection between multiple things. So once I started thinking about the vegetarian stuff, I'm like, well, this other stuff that I'm thinking about, like there's a similarity there between these two different things, and the inequalities that I'm picking up on, like they're similarly aligned. And so for me, like they became one and the same. Well, the reasoning for both became there was a joint reasoning there. It was no different, the reasoning for one or the other.
Right, I see. So, right, that's been very helpful for me, Diana. So I think that EIE makes the most sense for a typing for you in socionics. EIE.
EIE.
Ethical, intuitive, and then energizer. And that requires some explanation from me. So we'll go into it. And yeah, Giancarlo, he worked it out very quickly. So did Koba. Very, very good. So yeah, there are a few things earlier, right, which suggested to me to be a more either stronger or more pushed introverted logic. But so what I've been doing just in this last few minutes is try to really investigate that to find out exactly how strong the introverted logic is. And it seems to me that there is a pursuit for clarity of understanding and a desire to really understand how things fit together in a logical way. But also the way that you explain things is very wide ranging. It goes in different areas and it doesn't actually segment complete clarity. What is what? Why are these the principles which you're following and not these principles which you are following? But it is articulated. You are saying lots of things. You are letting out lots of information which is going in different areas. That just means that the extroverted logic is not very weak or even ignored, and it's not a very parsimonious way of explaining.
Sorry,
so things of what you're showing me suggesting
could be what you're speaking to, but
sorry,
I feel like sometimes it will seem like I'm putting all this stuff out there, and I'm aware that it seems like it's disconnected from the greater idea, but I'm always sort of working around to kind of give the context
exactly
to that original idea, which I think is probably not a bit, but I think that's kind of what you were trying to say.
So there's a balancing act there in the intuition. There's a focus on the more important, the more meaningful ideas, the overall gestalts of where you're trying to go. And supporting that is looking at it from different angles, finding new information which can then feed into that long-term or more important gestalt, or what is important to you. And you can reflect that in your head. And sometimes it takes you a while to really put your mind on what exactly is it that you've been thinking about. And sometimes you can then reach one position, you can then change your mind and reach a different way of thinking at another point. But it's like a switch. Like suddenly you're a vegan, suddenly you're not a vegan. And it's sort of where you settle and where you identify with based on the ideas which are in your head at the moment. So that suggests to me it hasn't got that very firm and very solid over time consistency and unmovability, which one can find in, say, an LSI, or even what we can find with an IEI, where they're actually far more close to taking in new information, new facts. Instead, I find that they're actually more of a changeability, but a pursuit for that more ironclad certainty. And I think where that shows up quite a bit is when you're at university and you felt that sort of imposter syndrome. We find that, hang on, I'm now in a situation where I haven't figured it out for myself. I haven't put together all sorts of, I haven't aligned the facts in a way which makes sense in an internal structure. And then you feel a bit more vulnerable. If you're going to find out actually you haven't got it all worked out. You haven't got expertise. Yeah, go on.
I don't know if it's relevant, but I mean, something I had forgot to mention at that time when I was talking about the stuff. The other thing with that situation there is I'm so aware, like my background, and then how the world is receiving me based on being a woman, based on not being a white person. I have gotten comments all the time, or people want to sort of be like categorize you. They're like, oh, so, because it's like they can tell I've got some kind of like ethnic something, but they don't know what. And depending on what they think I am, that changes how they then respond to me. And I am very, very aware of that. I'm so aware of that process, and I'm aware of the undermining that happens because of that. So I'm certainly also with the imposter syndrome at university. It was also like being aware that people are like also respond. Like it's not just what's being said. There's a disparity in terms of like who says what, how we interpret the information based on how the person appears who is giving us that information. So also kind of like expecting some undermining because of the vessel that the thing was, the ideas are coming from.
And that's also interesting. There's a reading there of and the information tapping into there, what people may be thinking, how people may be reacting to you based on more superficial assumptions. And also thinking about how I can managing all that. And you put in a lot of preparation into how you'll come across to others, making sure that you thought through what could go wrong, how things could actually muck up the image which you're trying to make sure.
Or how my actions will be received or interpreted. Yeah, like I'm always trying to think through like how could this go and trying to preempt any of that from happening ahead of time.
And that also is linking itself more to extroverted ethics with introverted intuition. EIEs can often come across as being more introverted because for them, they don't want to just go into a social situation and just take it as it is. They want to plan out their social appearances so that the image is not corrupted by the random chaos of actuality.
Yeah.
So they take how they come across very seriously in that respect, and they can start really trying to think through and even catastrophize to some degree in terms of how things will turn out in their public appearances. There is also, I think, there is that impatience, there is that drive to, when you see something which is wrong, you want to confront it, you want to correct it, you want to make sure that thing is made right. And there's that rushing forwards and dealing with it, but also a sense of vulnerability where that could also go wrong. You can feel people having power over you in certain respects. So I think you are more sharply aware of the extrovert sensation. I'm not sure if it's necessarily in a very strong position. I think it's more balanced with your introverted intuition, that detachment and that reflection over where things are going in the long term. And what I see is very clear is that lack of presentness, just taking in the day to day, switching off your mind, just to be sensorily sensorically integrated with your environment. And that seems to be the main struggle. And I think that makes sense more as a blind spot, which would be introvert sensation vulnerable. So if I see this balance of sort of cycling between impatience to confront, but also a sort of hesitancy just to really think things through and make sure it all, you can see where things are going. That energy, not imbalance, but it's a certain imbalance in the energy of cycling between confronting and hesitating, and a lack of that sort of flow and integration in the day-to-day environment, just taking things as they come. That suggests to me introvert intuition as a creative function, extrovert sensation as that mobilizing function, and then introverted sensation as that vulnerable function. And also the extrovert intuition as a demonstrative function, where it's a very strong but not valued for its own sake area, also makes sense because of how wide-ranging your answers are. They're quite long answers, which was good. I got lots of stuff out of that. But also the fact that you also accept that you're someone who naturally wants to have certainty, naturally wants to identify with your ideas very strongly, and can feel frustration when people can't seem to be able to come across to your way of thinking after throwing everything and the kitchen sink at the argument trying to give to someone. But you're also learning that people just aren't like that. You've got to get a sense of their perspectives, and maybe I can challenge myself to find new perspectives. So there is more of an openness there than what I find with other betas and gammas, which makes sense for both EIE and also the LIE, that demonstrative extroverted intuition. I'm not getting a sense of its value for its own sake. I think it's something which is a strong area for you from another set of values which you are using. Because
that's more of that's, again, like I said, that was not how I was in my early 20s. That's been like a massive change. And like I said, I look back and I will like think, oh my God, like I was so obnoxious. And like, I would never want to do things that way again. Like, I just don't value doing things that way. And I will give people more grace now. The closer you are to me, the more experience you've had with me, the more I will expect of you. But just like the average person, like I'm not going to, like I don't have the same expectations that I used to have. Like I would not at all apply those expectations to them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Let me just see if I can just go through the overall structure of the EIE for you, to see if it makes sense. So the main thing about EIE is about having that sort of emotional effect. It's about expressing authentically how they're feeling. If something is frustrating them, so they need to let that out very clearly and express everything to others around them.
I get to like an emergency or crisis mode before dealing. Like I want to be preventative rather than focusing on the cure of an emotional situation.
Oh, so just say that again. I didn't hear that.
I focus more on like prevention rather than cure. Like if there's like an emotional like I want to deal with something, nip it in the bud ahead of time before it turns into. But the thing is, I've learned people that don't do things this way, they can perceive people when we do it when we're focused on preventing, a crisis situation, they actually can see that as you starting an issue because they're only able to register the emotional field or the crisis component of it once it gets to that emergency zone. So if you try dealing with something ahead of time when they're not even like registering it, they're going to sometimes think that you're just creating an issue rather than you've picked up an issue before they have. And that's the other thing I'm always aware of. Like, like the perceptions, like I've probably arrived at something sooner than you've arrived at it. But, it's that thing of like trying to then mediate, like, there I'm trying to do with it so it doesn't like get crazy later and we're not in a red zone later. But like the IPs that I'm close to, like they're the same way. They're like, what are you going on about? Why are you going on about this? I'm like, because it's here and we can just deal with it now and then get over it and not have to even go to the emergency ward. We can just avoid the emergency ward altogether by doing triage way ahead of time.
Yes.
Which makes sense to me, but other people don't necessarily view it that way. So I'm also aware of that differing way of handling things and how it's perceived, how my actions and how I'm trying to show up, how that's being perceived by the other person if they don't process things that way or do things that way.
Right. Okay. And that's very much, I think, the introvert intuition side. So extroverted ethics and introvert intuition for an EIE are blocked together. It's the idea that there is the main thing about having those sorts of emotionally uplifting and exciting experiences and being able to create that for people around you. It's very much important that is actually being created, and how you're coming across is being factored in always to make sure you're coming across in a way which you think is important. And blocking with that is the introvert intuition, how people will react, how things will develop over time, and also then conveying quite in quite a way which gets people excited or gets people energized or feel a sense of urgency when things are coming along which are problems. And you can create you create the emotional energy and motivation and drive to sort those things out ahead of time. You can just see it coming, you just know that something is coming along almost intuitively, and you can interact with people through your appearances with people to create that sort of effect. Does that make sense, that first slide?
Yeah, that part makes sense. Like I said, it doesn't always work because different people are, different types of people. They're processing things differently. They cognitively, they have different functions. They have different, just different ways of dealing with things. So it's I try to foresee how things could go and then cater my response to that. But then also it doesn't always work.
Right, I see. Yeah. Certain personality clashes can then happen, and then you're sort of knowing how to then adjust to different sorts of people, which can be a
look. I think it's not just even different cognitive proclivities. It's just some people are going to be less wanting to deal with like the emotional realm. Like that's just something I've learned. Some people are. Doesn't matter how clear something is to you. Like, and it's also possible. Like I said, multiple things can be true at the same time. So someone can very consciously be thinking one thing, and then clearly, subconsciously, something else is going on, and you see that playing out in their behaviors and their actions. And I always focus on the patterns. I don't care if you do something one time; that's to me a fluke. But when I'm like, oh hey, in the space of a year, I've watched you do this thing like over and over and over, like that's something that when I try talking to people about that, they're just like, what are you talking about? No. So again, consciously they're not aware of it, but like it would be clear to anyone who's paying attention to the trend that it's going on. So it's having that with different people as well, like knowing that like multiple things are going on at different levels. So I end up feeling very responsible to like orchestrating like this entire thing where the other person's like they're not doing that and they've got no idea what's up. So that's draining. That's very actually draining.
When you don't get the reactions which you're trying to create.
Pardon?
When you put in all this effort to actually orchestrate and make sure this is an experience for people, and people aren't then responding to that, and you can see the patterns in their behavior, you can see what is actually what they've been doing over time, and you find that they can't actually see the patterns which you're seeing.
Yeah, and I'm not saying not immediately, but sometimes they can come back later and be like, when they're over there, like the ego moment, and be like, yeah, I can see that was happening. But when I say orchestrate, I don't mean like I'm trying to engineer a particular response. I mean, I'm more trying to preempt. I'm trying to preempt unnecessary misunderstandings that aren't conducive to like a productive conversation. Like I don't want anyone's like feelings to get hurt and then to derail an important conversation because like someone's like perceived things in a way that they just didn't mean. So like I'm always trying to like make sure like the noise isn't happening, so we can just deal with the actual thing.
Okay, I see. So the thing of greater importance would be get sidetracked and derailed. So you want to try to manage that aspect so that and preempt different problems occurring so that the important conversation is had.
I don't want it to be clouded by like unnecessary, like someone like taking the wrong thing for something that's being said. So like I do this thing where like I try to give so many disclaimers ahead of time so that I'll be like, look, I'm going to say this thing. I don't mean this. I don't intend this. I know it's likely that you might think this, but I'm arriving at it from this. Then I know you do things this way. So I'm always trying to like close that gap and sort of like try to reconcile as much as I can any gap in understanding that we're going to have.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense.
Usually I'm the person in my close relationships, I'm usually the person doing that. Less so
be the boss, but you have that sort of energy where you end up being in that sort of leading position.
If I see something that needs to be done,
or
if I feel like there's like some kind of like emotional mess, or like if I feel like there's a disagreement, or like I'm not understanding someone, or they're not understanding me, I want to put in the work. I want to reach that understanding. And it's been said to me, like, I can over-explain. I overthink. I over-explain. I talk too much. It's like, I'm doing that because I understand that one of the ways that I said it may not be a way that, if you think like radio frequencies, like you need to be tuned into the right frequency to get the message. So I'm aware that, like, I'm trying different frequencies to be like, okay, which message are they going to get now? That could just seem like too much talking to the other person. It's like they're not aware that, like, I'm putting in so much effort and time into, like, making sure that we're having like, when you go into an office, someone has put in the time. There's usually an office manager to set up that office, to make sure that all the supplies are there that need to be. You don't just walk into an office and all the stuff that you need is just magically there. You're not bringing it in yourself. Someone else that you don't even know about, you don't even think about, someone else has done that work so that you can come in and just do whatever you need to do, and you have every need met. You've got a full stock kitchen, you've got cups, you've got everything, you've got your computers, you've got all the cables that you need, you've got you don't think about any of that stuff, but someone about that stuff. Someone had to set up that space so that it could be used comfortably and effortlessly by someone. So, like, I feel like that's kind of the thing I'm always trying to do, set things up so that the thing can just be done when I'm with the other person, and we can do it as best as we can. But you're always going to get people who are like, oh, this isn't the chair that I like, and I'm using that as a, like, oh, you're saying something in a way that I'm not, and it's like, okay, I'm not that attached to that. Like, it's like the idea I'm trying to, it's like, okay, that didn't land. Let me put it a different way then. Until I use a lot of analogies. I speak almost entirely in like these images, because I feel like that's like, I can't help it, and also it's just a good way for people to like kind of understand what I'm trying to say.
That makes sense. So very much communicating analogies, communicating some pictures and images, very much that intuitive side, and also needing to plan things out and some little trivial things, just sort of throw it all out in terms of a social experience, and that can be very frustrating. I wanted to also find was interesting in terms of extroverted logic for you, was that you actually where you do research, you focus more on that qualitative side rather than the quantitative side. Just the facts in of themselves, the statistics are less interesting to you. It's more talking to people and picking out trends, picking out things which are.
Yeah, look, the thing is, statistics in and of themselves, they're important, but they can't necessarily tell you the underlying, they can tell you what is, but they can't necessarily tell you why.
Yeah.
I'm far more drawn to the qualitative side, because the whole point when we do qualitative research is you're looking for the patterns, the trends. You're looking for like what's keeps being repeated to you. You're looking for like the underlying component of things.
Yes.
So I'm always drawn to qualitative research, and I did very well. Whereas the quantitative, the straight statistics, like I struggled a lot more with that. Just one, I think like TE, you need like really strong TE, which I know I don't have. And also just not that interesting to me. Qualitative side is always interesting to me.
Exactly. And I think from that, I think it's quite clear that extroverted logic will make sense as a superego function. I'm thinking it makes more sense as a role function rather than a vulnerable function. I don't think sorry?
As a role function, what does that mean?
That means that you can recognize its need to some degree, and you can respond to it and do some of the hard work in it, but it feels unnatural and it feels off-putting to do, as opposed to a vulnerable function where it's like almost a total blind spot and you just can't really begin to understand why this is an important thing. If I'm with IEI,
it's being important, but it's also one, it doesn't interest me as much, and two, it's ignoring the underlying. For me, everything's like, what's the underlying thing here? Like, what's like I hate focusing on the symptoms. I want to know like what are the contributing factors? What are the potential causes of something? Not like what's the product of something,
And that's interesting as well. But you also see facts as presenting in a superficial way, as logic blocked with introverted sensation, looking at what isn't working now. And you see, that's not interesting. You want the underlying why behind it. Whereas if you take, say, an LIE, for instance, which is extrovert logic with introverted intuition, they're still very fact-oriented and quantitative-oriented, but they'll be picking out long-term trends from these facts and inferring a lot from it. Whereas, say, an LSE is going to be dealing with, I just need as many facts as I can to understand the situations around me, which I can directly take in and solve and tinker with. So it's interesting in that respect that extrovert logic, you will see it as blocked in the sort of day-to-day, rather than seeing it as something which supports introvert intuition. And so in your case, I think it's making more sense. The introvert intuition is actually blocked with the extroverted ethics. The why is very important. So the introverted logic with introverted intuition both seem to be very important things for you. The why understood almost in a structural sense-made way, rather than just lots of factual data to support all of it. But it seems to me also that you weren't showing so much of the introverted logic after I was questioning you more in terms of the specifics of what you were saying. And it does seem to be there's more of a changeability, more of a mercurial way in which the ideas which you settle on can then change, and you can go to shift to another point of view. Even though you're looking for something which is ironclad, something which is very set, which you know you put it to enough of a test that you don't feel you need to doubt it anymore. And
yeah, and even that's not necessarily black and white, but it's more like, do I have stronger tones of grey for this, like tones of grey for this idea, as opposed to paler shades of grey for this idea? It's not black and white.
Yes, that's interesting, because an EIE, they are more aware of the shades of grey. But take an LSI, an LSI should be the dual of an EIE. They're the ones who can make things completely clear and unambiguous. And an EIE sees lots of different shades of grey around it, but they're sort of looking for things to become more unambiguous and become more certain.
Yeah, I mean, for me, like there's a few big principles that for me it's like, yeah, these are the things that are happening, and I'll sort of like apply them to anything. It's like, yeah, people are doing that because of this, or people are having because of this, but it's still sort of like, it's not a black and white thing. Like there are always exceptions. I'm not comfortable with that kind of thinking with anything. It's funny because as you were speaking before, I guess like the same kind of thing, but in terms of like just thinking of like in politics, for example, like Trump is like a figure who not everyone hates him. A lot of people tend to hate him. And for me, I mean, I don't love the guy, but so the general thing is like, I don't think he's great. But I also feel like people singularly focus on him as a figure way too much. And they privilege that focus over understanding like what is going on socially and politically, culturally, where we're not so much concerned, we're more focused on him rather than the conditions and the underlying, the contributing factors that create the Trumps of the world, that create these figures. Like we focus on the figures, but it's like, to me, it's like, it's not the figure, it's what is creating these people.
Is that, I'm not sure that's an example of shades of grey though. That seems to me to be instead that seems to me to be you saying that people are focusing on the superficial element rather than the underlying causes, rather than the greater trends underneath this particular instance. That's different to saying it's not black and white here, it's more shades of grey. You need a different example, perhaps.
Okay, so that's interesting. I have to think about creating it. So there's a delineation for you between that being an example of shades of grey. Because I agree. It's not so much shades of grey per se. Yeah. But I'm kind of around the thing rather than speak the actual thing. But yeah, so maybe something else that was mentioned. But yeah, that was just sort of like in my head of like, this is an example of that kind of thinking.
Yes.
But yeah, I'm not. It's not so much. It's more like, and even here in Australia, we had like a similar. I don't know if you would know much about Australian politics, even though there's a lot of commonality between our system and the British system. But like Tony Abbott, like he was another figure, and I can understand the mechanics of it.
We typed him like Trump, actually.
What's that?
We typed the same type as Trump. Tony Abbott.
Tony Abbott. Wow, there you go. That's so interesting.
And the guy after him, IEI, I think, and now Scott Morrison, LSI. So.
Interesting. But yeah, so I don't know, Scott Moore, I mean, people don't really like him. I mean, obviously some people like him, but his detractors, people don't like him as much, but it's more, I think Tony Abbott was like our equivalent of Trump.
Yeah.
Like he got that kind of response. And it was even bizarre for me here because and I understand why humans do it. It's so much easier for us to like focus on the short term because it's if we feel like we can't fix things, it's uncomfortable for us. It's easier to focus on like putting a band-aid on something than being like, oh shit, we got to do surgery here. And like, we don't know how to do that. So like, I can understand why it's happening, but I also see it as like unhelpful to fixate on, which isn't to say these people shouldn't be like held accountable. But for me, it's like these people as figures, like I'm not so concerned with them as to like, why do they exist? Like, how did they come about? You know, like what is going on socially that, you know, someone can, such a person can be produced who has these ideas and thinks this way. Like, what is going on there? And these are just the ones that we know about because they interface with the public. They are in an elevated platform, so more people know about them. So there are so many Trumps and Abbotts just walking among us, but they don't have a platform, so we don't know. And so because we don't know about them, we just think they're a problem, which makes it so much easier to then focus on these guys as being the problem. And I just find that for me, it's difficult. I find generally when I try to express that idea, like I kind of lose people because people seem to be pretty committed to like just hating on these figures. And to me, it's like,
Dan, I do need to go soon just because I got another appointment with someone. But it's been a pleasure to speak with you. If you have any questions, you want to have further discussion, I'm open to that. Send me a message or an email, and maybe we can have a follow-up discussion later if you'd like it.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. That's good. I'm sorry I didn't get to any Q&A or anyone else. I thought it did take a bit longer than normal because I was just trying to...
I honestly have no perception of how long it's been because I've just been focused on the...
Yes.
Okay. So maybe it's... Okay. Yeah. I don't know I can't see the...
Oh, you can't see the chat? Oh.
You know, I was in private, but then there's live. Okay, I've been in private the whole time, so because I think it's there by default. I didn't realize that. Okay.
Private comment. I see. No, there we go.
I don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, thank you so much for the interview, and thank you everyone for tuning in. Wishing you all the best. Take care now.
All right. Bye, everyone.